Hello, this is Scott Turner, and I'm Director of Science Programs at the National Association of Scholars. And this is the Week in Science for the 1st of May, 2025. Let's jump in with two articles from the May 1st edition of Science Magazine that caught my eye this week. First out of the box is this news article about the ongoing meltdown of the scientific community over the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts. Panchanathan was appointed to be director of the National Science Foundation during the first Trump administration. He announced recently that he was going to leave his position 18 months before the end of his 6-year term. According to this news report by Jeffrey Mervis, he was simply, quote, unable to stomach the massive changes that Trump had imposed upon the agency. Oh dear. What were those changes? The Trump administration was demanding that NSF cut its budget by 55% and a reduction of staff from its current level of about 1,700 people to about half that. This was very distressing. He had tried so hard, you see, to make the NSF more efficient and more responsive to government. And this was his reward. So unfair. Okay, but which government? For most of Panchanathan's tenure, the government in question was the Biden administration, under which overall science funding increased by roughly 20% over his term. Much of the increase reflected the Biden administration's political priorities for climate change, DEI, environmental justice, and other, quote, woke, unquote, priorities. The final straw for Panchanathan was coming under the scrutiny of Elon Musk and Doge. Musk, working from a list provided by Senator Ted Cruz, identified about 3,500, quote, woke grants, close quote, that were contrary to the order, and recommended terminating about 550 new awards. This was all keeping with President Trump's executive order limiting DEI and woke policies in all federal agencies. The cuts would have saved about $2 billion from the NSF's budget. So much for Panchanathan tightening up the NSF ship. Next, we turn to another article from the May 1st edition of Science Magazine about an ecologist, Thomas Crowther, who recently was terminated from his position at the ETH in Zurich, Switzerland. Crowther's principal interest is in ecosystem biodiversity and restoration of degraded ecosystems. Remember that word, biodiversity. It will be relevant to the story. He's doing some interesting work, and he's attracted quite a lot of research funding. He was building his own laboratory at the ETH and had several postdocs and graduate students working under his supervision. His future at ETH was looking pretty bright. Crowther had become an ecology rock star. Climate change comprises a significant part of Crowther's work. Not surprisingly, this brought him public attention and some notoriety, mostly over his involvement with the United Nations Trillion Trees Initiative, and, of course, all that grant money. His argument was that much of the impact of elevated atmospheric carbon dioxide could be ameliorated by planting 1 trillion trees worldwide. Much of his own work was on the ecological feasibility of actually planting 1 trillion trees, and he concluded that it is feasible. That drew some ire from climate scientists, hence the notoriety. But really, that's just normal scientific argument. So what was the ETH's beef with Crowther? Well, that's all a little vague, and the ETH is not being very forthcoming in why it wanted to push Crowther out. There were supposedly a number of complaints about, quote, blurring personal and professional boundaries and broke rules regarding financial compliance and hiring. Oddly, the ETH ethics report didn't mention Crowther by name, but it was obvious it was he being targeted. You know, quote, anonymous ecologist who wants to plant many, many trees, close quote. A pretty clumsy cover-up, really. According to the ethics report, Crowther failed to maintain, quote, an adequate professional distance from students, doctoral students, and staff. Anonymous complaints were made that the culture in Crowther's laboratory was, quote, reminiscent of the toxic culture of Silicon Valley, close quote. Can't have that. And that there were, quote, repeated cases of inappropriate behavior towards employees in the context of pranks and games, close quote. Pranks and games, that sounds pretty serious, all right. So, was there a bro culture that intimidated women? The lab was exuberant by all accounts, but men and women have been at rough parity in his lab for at least 5 years. So where's the bro culture? His research manager denied ever seeing anything that, quote, would be construed as personal misconduct or harassment. That's interesting. One postdoc described the climate of Crowther's lab as among the happiest and most supportive environments I have ever worked in. That's interesting. And social media posts and petitions from the members of his lab echoed these sentiments. So ETH engaged a law firm to investigate the complaints, but by all indications, the allegations were some kind of personal vendetta against Crowther by former members of his lab. Their complaints were filled with so many contradictions that the law firm acknowledged that, quote, between the lines, the complainants may not have always told the truth, close quote. So ETH dropped all the misconduct charges. They were too cowardly to exonerate Crowther, though, so they made allegations of financial mismanagement, really bookkeeping errors by the look of it. So the ETH forced Crowther out. It seems he was concerned too much with the wrong kind of diversity. He's not saying much about his future, but who knows? Now that the Trump administration is banning wokeness from science, maybe he'll find a congenial home here in the USA. Okay, that's it for This Week in Science. Visit us on the National Association of Scholars YouTube page, and visit us also on the National Association of Scholars website at nas.org. If you enjoyed this, please consider joining us as a member. And if you're already a member, thanks for your ongoing support. See you next week.